Hello, welcome. This video is predicting that there will be a black swan event in the stock market on March 3rd, 2026. As we can see here, this email was composed on March 1st. That said, as you will see, as I'll explain and prove, well, I don't know about prove, but I'll show you in these notes here in this email anyway, that this prediction for March 3rd and there being a black swan event has been known since mid-February. You will see that in this email. But anyway, regardless, this timestamp in this email proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does the post date of the video you are watching on the social media platform that you are watching it on. All right, and so let's be clear about what a black swan event is. A black swan event refers to a shocking, sudden, unexpected event. Many black swan events are many sudden shocks to the stock market in history have been called black swan events. The best example of this would be, or one of the best examples, would be Black Monday in 1987, when the Dow lost its record amount of percent in terms of points in one day, almost 23%. The Dow lost in one day in October of 1987. Okay, so that was a black swan event. Black Thursday was a black swan event in 1929, a sudden unexpected shock and massive loss in the stock market. All right, and so that's what's predicted here for March 3rd. In fact, I suspect that it's possible that the market will temporarily shut down, because they have in the stock market in New York City this trigger mechanism where if the market loses, I think the first trigger is 7%. The market loses 7% in that single day, during that day of trading, the market shuts down. I think it's for 30 minutes or something. And then again, it's triggered if the market loses, I'm just guessing now, something like 13%. I don't know. But then if the market loses 20% in the day, in one day, at some point during that day, if the market loses 20%, the market shuts down for the rest of the day. That's the way it's set up now. And I believe that it's possible that that will happen on March 3rd. Okay? And I have reason for not just speculating that, but I have reasons prophetically. Which brings me to my next point. The way to know that this prediction is from God are the reasons that I'll be explaining in this video. As you will see, no one is creative enough. No one could have concocted these reasons in their own imagination. What I will be explaining is clearly from God, and you will see this. To conclude otherwise would be not only completely irrational, but make the person a complete, utter fool. Okay, so it's one thing to predict that there'll be a crash. I'm not only predicting a black swan event, which is, how often does a black swan event occur? And if you think that I'm making a video for every day of the year for years and years in the hopes that someday there'll be a black swan event on the date that I'm predicting there will be, you are the crazy person. Because that is crazy, and that makes you the crazy person. It's crazy to think that I would do such a thing. Only a crazy person would do such a thing. And to think that I would do that makes you the crazy person. Like, seriously. But I understand the religion of agnostic atheism. It is a hardcore fundamentalist religion. And the followers are zealots, true fundamentalists. And I understand how they think. And nothing ever will convince them that there is a God. Because the core belief in every religion, or every worldview is a religion, and every religion or worldview has its core belief. that makes the religion. And without that core belief, you are not in that religion. And the core belief of agnostic atheism is that there is no evidence for God. Or I should back up. I should say the core belief of agnostic atheism is that there may or may not be a God, but it's impossible to know because there is no evidence for God, which is the biggest lie in all of history. Because the evidence for God is overwhelming, and of course it would be if there is a God and he intended you to find him, which raises another point, but I'll get to that in a second. Well, let's just go there. So why does God partially hide himself? To give the opportunity to the creature to choose him of their own free will, which is how we are created in the image of God. If God wanted to have a relationship with the creature, and if he just stood in front of it after it was born and said, hey, welcome to life, I'm God, love me, that would be insincere and forced and genuine love, right? Obviously, no one wants to marry a robot or someone who is forced to love them, so why would God be any different? And so that's not God's plan. God's plan is to give the individual the freedom, the free will, to make the choice whether or not they would like to be with the righteous Christian God of the Bible forever or not. And a lot of people, most people, don't want that, and they're entitled to that decision. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a free will. And therefore, some people are not going to choose that. And so what they do is they turn the blind eye to the evidence. That's the spiritual truth. I mean, let's be real. This materialism, scientism worldview is so outdated, it's ridiculous. I mean, this worldview came into being in the late 1700s, early 1800s, when it was figured out that it wasn't necessary to have a worldwide flood to explain the lines in the rocks in geology. Okay? We've come a long way since the early 1800s in terms of science even. Even early 20th century science overwhelmingly proves an intelligent designer. But the propaganda, which the people love to hear, tells them that there's no such thing as scientific evidence for God, but that's even a lie in itself. There's all kinds of evidence beyond the quote-unquote scientific evidence. But anyway, so the propaganda is eaten up because the truth is people don't want there to be a God. And they would prefer that if there is a God, this is how they see it, well, I will just find out when I get there. I would rather not think about it right now. And that's the whole point. They missed the entire point of their existence. It is a test, if you will, a choice, to see who will think about it or not. And so the agnostic atheist refuses to think about it, and they give up. But not only that, they think of all kinds of excuses for not thinking about it. Anyway, a similar thing, this similar line of thinking also applies to the New Agers and Islamists, etc. But anyway, but the agnostic atheist does not want there to be a God. For them, that is icky. They do not want, they're uncomfortable with the idea of them waking up in the morning and praying to a God, etc. They'd rather not. They'd rather go their own way, which brings up another metaphor that Jesus used. It's the separation of the sheep and the goats. The goats can't be herded. They go their own way. The original sin, independence from God. The sheep follow the shepherd. And so most people are goats, And so anyway, it's all spiritual. And the point is that this video will prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, and that is the purpose of this prediction. The primary purpose. There are other purposes as well. I mean, the truth is that the evidence for the righteous Christian God of the Bible is overwhelming and all over the place. You don't really need this prediction in this video. The bigger, actually, I shouldn't have said primary, the bigger reasons, the bigger purpose of this prediction is not only to prove the God of the Bible, the righteous Christian God of the Bible, but also to prove the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video. And these controversial things are not up for debate when this prediction comes to pass. There's absolutely zero discussion at all regarding these controversial things that I'll be saying. And believe me, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it isn't for you to go, oh, cool, neat, you were able to know this ahead of time. No, that is not the purpose of this prediction that is from God. I know the purpose of this prediction that is from God. I know why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And it is to prove these controversial things that I'll be saying in this video, which I'll point out along the way. But let's get into this. Let's start going through these reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time, which clearly indicate that this prediction is from God. Well, let me just outline this prediction a little bit more here to make it understood what is going on here and how serious this is. Okay, so it would be one thing to predict that there will be a crash. There are people out there, of course, that are predicting not only a crash, but in the near term, like in the near future. Those people exist. They're a small minority, okay? There's a small minority, but they exist. Now, I'm not talking about a recession, because there is even a bigger number of people that are predicting a recession, because that's, recessions happen, right? Crashes don't happen every day, though. Recessions happen, but crashes don't. I'm not only predicting, though, that there will be a crash in the near future. I'm predicting the precise date of this initial shock or black swan event to this crash. But not only that, not only am I predicting the precise date of this crash, or at least the beginning of it, I am predicting that this crash will be the biggest crash in all of history. But there are people out there that are predicting the biggest crash in history, and you don't need to be a believer in the righteous Christian God of the Bible to know that. But what you do need to be to assimilate this information into a proper worldview after this, and what I mean is this prediction and these reasons for this, knowing this prediction for March 3rd, that can only be explained through prophecy, through prophetic signs, through the reasons which I'll explain are God's communications to how God is saying that this will happen on March 3rd. And as you'll see, these reasons could not be concocted. So if this prediction comes to pass as predicted, and there is a black swan event, a massive financial shock to the market on March 3rd, then you will know that these reasons are from God, and therefore this is proof for the righteous Christian God of the Bible. All right. Now, so let's just open up here with this paragraph. This email is documenting the prediction that there will be a black swan event in the U.S. stock market on March 3rd, 2026. A black swan event is a shocking and unexpected event. In this case, what is predicted is a massive loss in the stock market that may possibly involve a temporary shutdown of the market. Okay? Now, what I'm reading here, because this is last minute, is just notes. I'm just reading notes, notations. I'm going to elaborate on my notes, but these are just notes, okay? This isn't like some fancy write-up that you would publish, okay? This is just notes. And the first note here is that turning point hints at the turning point of the stock market, okay? That's one of the prophetic significances of this name, turning point, and March 3rd. All right, so I just figured it out. I just found out just now. I paused the recording here. I just found out that the death of Charlie Kirk was exactly 5 months before the turning point, the peak of the Dow. So the peak of the Dow at this time, March 1st, as I showed you here, at this time, the all-time peak was February 10th. Charlie Kirk died on September 10th. That's exactly 5 months, but that's also 153 days. 153 is one of three unusually specific numbers in the Bible. And this number occurs in the last chapter of the book of John, the last of the Gospels, in Jesus' last miracle, when 153 fish were miraculously caught in the net. Charlie Kirk was a fisher of men. And this 153 fish caught in the net in the last miracle of Jesus is symbolic of the end of the age of fishing for men, which is why in the text they were 2,000 cubits, or is it 200 cubits from shore, which hinted at 2,000 roughly years later, the age of fishing for men, because Jesus told the disciples that they would become fishers of men. And so the age of fishing for men, and the end of it, is symbolized with this number 153. And we are rapidly approaching the end of the age of the end of the age of fishing for men. Well, Charlie Kirk was known for being a fisher of men. That's what he was on a mission to do. He used politics on college campuses to accomplish this. So he was a fisher of men. Also, the name Kirk literally means church. I think it's... the name Kirk is Old Norse, and it means church. So his name literally means church, and the word church doesn't mean a building in which people go into and worship. The church means God's people. And so Charlie Kirk means church, and he was killed in Orem, which is also Old Norse. Coincidentally, the name Orem, that's the town he was killed in, is Old Norse and means serpent. And, the serpent is the symbol of evil in the Bible and Satan. The number of the Antichrist, the Satan's representative, is 666. And this 5 months is also 21 weeks and 6 days, which gives us, or hints at, the number 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6. And the Antichrist was born on the 216th day of the calendar year, Barack Obama. And that's one of the controversial things, by the way, which is case closed when this prediction comes to pass. So if you are an evangelical that loves to play the Antichrist guessing game, it's time for you to stop. And I mean that. You are wasting your time, and there's no excuse now that you know, because as I say, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove what I have just said. There's no debate. It's time to stop playing the Antichrist guessing game. And it is a silly game. And I really don't mean to offend, but it is shameful that this game is played, because the first of the two Antichrists is a pope, and that's clear from Old Testament prophecy. There's no excuse. And there wouldn't have been a Protestant Reformation had it not been for this knowledge. But the reason for the Antichrist guessing game today is this misinterpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which is based on the false heretical doctrine that salvation doctrine that evangelicals hold today. That's another subject which I've gone over so many other times in other videos. And we're just getting started here, so let's not get into that. So anyway, okay, so back to what I was saying. 153 days, that's amazing. The turning point, literally the all-time high, we now know is confirmed with this 153-day connection. Should have known that before, actually. I should have looked into that before. It just occurred to me just now. Shoot. Could have known that. I could have known that back on February 10th. Could have made that prediction back on February 10th. Shoot. That's a shame. That's too bad that I just realized that only just now. All right. Well, all right. So let's move on here. 3-3 is exactly 217 weeks after the prophetic peak, which was prophetic, of the stock market on January 5th, 2022. All right, and that was recognized at the time that this was a prophetic peak. The Dow made its all-time peak at 36,952 points, and if we subtract that number of days from this date, we get November 4th, 1921, when in U.S. territory, the Philippines at the time was U.S. territory, and it's all about the U.S., God's Gentile nation. 44 deaths occurred when the boat capsized. Most of them were eaten by sharks. The 44th president is the Antichrist king, which is why the boat was named Basilio, which means king in Portuguese. And that day was exactly the 44 deaths was exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 months to this other 11/4 November 4th date, which 11 times 4 equals 44, and the discovery of King Tut's tomb. And on and on, because that date connects with 1109 days, which ends at 9/11, and God pairs 9 and 110 together, and blah, blah, blah. And we got the Obama moon, the 44th president's blood moon lunar eclipse, in which the eclipse was 4 minutes and 44 seconds long, and the shortest in 400 years. And the Israelites were persecuted in Egypt for 400 years and then escaped the persecution from the king of Egypt. Okay. And that's what the 4 plus 4 plus 4 months, since at the 4 minutes and 44 seconds long blood moon lunar eclipse. Anyway, Barack Obama is the American Pharaoh. The American Pharaoh horse won the Triple Crown for the first time in 444 months after the last Triple Crown winner. And anyway, so he's the American Pharaoh, Barack Obama. Okay, the American Antichrist. But now back to this connection here. 217 weeks from this all-time peak. That hints at Genesis 7, because the flood judgment began, the crash of water, if you will, on the 17th day of the second month. Also, this January 5th, 2022 date was exactly 70 weeks, which comes from the most central prophecy in the Bible, Daniel chapter 9, regarding the period of the end times and the Antichrist. And that was exactly 70 weeks after this other stock market peak sign, September 2nd, 2020. When David Blaine fell from the sky in his ascension stunt. Okay, and David Blaine hints at 217. Because he was born on the same day that the Twin Towers officially opened, and they collapsed when 2 planes struck them 17 minutes apart. Which is a parallel with the 2 planes the 2 shuttle disasters 17 years apart, exactly. And Blaine held his breath underwater for literally just a couple seconds over 17 minutes on the Oprah Winfrey Show and broke the world record. Okay, so that's why we get David Blaine's fall from the sky, which at the time I even knew prior to his fall that it would be a prophetic sign pointing to the peak of the stock market, because the stunt was originally supposed to happen, for one thing, in the Big Apple, and Blaine is born in the Big Apple, but also compared to Harry Houdini, who was famously born from Appleton, Wisconsin. And it was also recognized prior to his fall that Apple's stock, because he would symbolize the fall of man, which is depicted by an apple in Western art. And and I recognized prior to September 2nd, 2020, that Apple's stock would make a peak, an interim peak, and begin falling precisely in conjunction with the timing of David Blaine's fall, and that's exactly what happened. I predicted that in advance, and that's exactly what happened. Apple didn't recover from that peak until late December that year. So it was a significant peak, as I predicted it would be. Unfortunately, though, that's way back in 2020, and that video is long lost on another channel that was cancel cultured. All right, and now, for speaking too much truth. Now, March 3rd is exactly 1,158 months, okay, after September 3rd, 1929, which was the all-time, well, not the all-time peak, but the peak high of the stock market before its crash, okay? So why is 1158 months relevant? Well, because this word in the Greek concordance for the Bible used only once is the word Daniel, which is the end times prophet in the Old Testament. And Jesus said this word in the New Testament once in Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, which is about the end times. Okay, not only that, but 1158 months is 96 years and 6 months, and the 966th composite number is 1158, which makes this a second witness confirmation that confirms the matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of... Okay, let me just back up here. The way God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. All right, and so we also have a hint at, because of the 1158 months connection, hinting at Daniel the prophet, we have the book of Daniel the prophet, chapter 9, verse 3, with this date, September 3rd, 9-3. Daniel 9:3, quote, which, by the way, is the introductory verse to the most central prophecy in the, the most central prophecy in the Bible. In the beginning of it is symbolized by this one verse. Because the reason why this turns into the most central prophecy and why Gabriel comes to Daniel and gives him the prophecy is because of the prayer that begins with this, quote, then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes, unquote. One of the most humble verses in the Bible. So Daniel 3:3, which is this date we're talking about, so 9:3 in 1929 is predicted to connect to 3:3 in 2026. So Daniel 3:3 is also very symbolic. Quote, then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, unquote. So Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation talks about the image of the beast that will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. This third chapter of Daniel symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. This pressure to conform to the false religious worship. In this case, taking the mark of the Antichrist. In our modern case. The image of the beast, when we translate that from the original Greek, we get properly, when John was describing it, or trying to, something that is uttering an unutterable language. Something that is speaking, the image of the beast speaks, as it says in the book of Revelation. But if we read it from the original Greek, it's clear that John is describing something that's difficult to describe, because he's saying that it's speaking an unutterable language, which is computer code. The image of the beast is a smartphone and the internet, which will be used to enforce the mark of the beast, the mark of the Antichrist, which is the VACCINE. And that is a controversial thing that will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. And believe me, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. Make no mistake. And when I say it is the mark of the Antichrist, it does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship. It did come with a false form of religious worship, which is leftist woke politics and Marxism. And also, it does not need a so-called new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is that it is judgment for this particular doctrine that Jesus said is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth and those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And everything that I've just said is 100% true when this prediction comes to pass, and I know more than you the purpose of this prediction. It is not for you to go cool. It is for you to know that the mark of the beast already is the thing, and and most quote-unquote Christians have already taken it. That said, nowhere in the Bible does it say one cannot repent after having taken it. This case closed. I'm sorry for the commonly held objections that you have based on your understanding of Bible prophecy to learn how they are incorrect, which they will be when this prediction comes to pass. That's the purpose of the prediction. Please watch the snake bite video on this channel. Okay, enough said though. Let's move on. All right, now, okay. So, and this mark of the Antichrist will be implemented through digital programmable currency, which will be the result of this market crash that we're talking about in this video that's being predicted. And so that's how it's all relevant. And again, the beginning initial shock of this crash is predicted to occur on 3-3, which is why Daniel 3:3, which symbolizes all of this, is relevant. And again, it connects with this Daniel number of months to 9:3, which is the symbolic beginning of the most central prophecy in the Bible, which regards the end times. Okay, so let's get into another reason here. 34 days, which is also 2 times 17 days, which also hits at 9/11 because of the two planes that hit the tower 17 minutes apart. And also, by the way, speaking of the stock market, on that day of 9/11, the stock market didn't open. The Dow was held at 9,605 points, which hints at 9/11, because the 6 and the 5 hint at 11. So 9,605, but also 605 points hints at the 56 passengers that were on the second plane 17 minutes after the first one. Anyway, it was actually 9,605.51 points. And that was a point, 0 point, okay, and that number that closed on the Tuesday, from the Monday, because the market didn't open on the Tuesday, the Monday's close was 9,605.51, which was 0.34 points below the Friday's close, which was 9,605.85 points. Okay, and so that was, in other words, that's another reason why 34 here is a 9/11 number. It's also the 9th Fibonacci number, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, which was what was warned of through the 9/11 events. Okay, so now we have this sign here when Melania Trump rang the opening bell on January 28th at the New York Stock Exchange. The ringing of the bell by a trump. Trump in archaic English means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. And the Israelites blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. Melania is a trump that was on Wall Street. Not only that, though, the day that she rang the opening bell on Wall Street, which is where the 9/11 events occurred, which is why this 9/11 number of days is relevant. The day she rang the opening bell was 111.23% of a year after December 18th, 2024, when the Dow lost in one day 1,123 points. And that was astounding because we knew this date was being pointed to ahead of time for the stock market. And the reason why 1,123 points was mind-boggling at the time is because we know this is a number that God uses. Why? Because it is the 188th prime number. Why is that relevant? The 188th word in the Hebrew concordance is the word woe, exclamation mark, which is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Furthermore, the 9/11 events on 9/11, which is where Wall Street is, was exactly 188 years after the only other time that a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital, on 9/11 in 1813, when the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate before proceeding to burn down the Capitol building and White House, but not before Dolly Madison famously rescued the portrait of George Washington. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, which is explained in the other videos. But it has to do with Washington on Wall Street, which is why this is relevant here, and why we knew ahead of time December 18th, because it's Wall Street, and this day was 2 + 2 + 2 days, and Washington was born on the date 2/22 after December 12th, 2024, and that was the day that Trump rang the opening bell on Wall Street, when he was promoting Time magazine, who had named him Person of the Year for the second time. And then we had this series of 2-day intervals, because on the 14th and 16th and then the 18th, 2 plus 2 plus 2 days, on each of those other days we had relevant signs related to all of this. So we had this thing going on that climaxed with 2 plus 2 plus 2 days later with another sign on Wall Street, which was a collapse of 1,123 points, as in the walls of security collapsing on Jericho in the Bible. But that was relevant because of Washington, who was born on the date 222. Because Washington was inaugurated in Federal Hall on Wall Street, directly across from the stock exchange. And after him becoming the first president, and God uses firsts, he founded the nation and walked, or marched, if you will, down Wall Street, like the Israelites marched around the walls of security, into Trinity Chapel, the only building to have survived 9/11 at Ground Zero, and did so without even a broken window. It's today called the Miracle Chapel, and in that chapel, Washington dedicated the nation to God at the beginning of the nation, and said if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings, which it temporarily did on 9/11. And God pointed to this, Washington's consecration of the nation to God, through 9/11. Now, this December 12th, 2024 was 12 plus 12 months, and 24 is 12 plus 12. So the date 12/12 in the year 12 plus 12 was 12 plus 12 months exactly after 12/12 in 2022, when Elon Musk said, "Follow the white rabbit," when he tweeted, "Follow the white rabbit." Okay, well, on the date 2/17 this year, it was the white rabbit solar eclipse, which is another long story. But there's an asteroid named White Rabbit that was in conjunction with the solar eclipse on this just recent solar eclipse on 2/17. We can get into more things here too, but let's just move on. Okay. So 6 plus 6 plus 6 days. March 3rd will be 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after February 13th. All right. Now, Ezra 2:13, which is what is hinted at, gives us the number 666. It's one of 3 occurrences of this number in the Bible, which is the number of the Antichrist. And in this Ezra 2:13 verse, it says the number of sons of the man named Adonikam. And in Revelation, it says that the name of the Antichrist can be calculated, and his name is equal to 666. Okay. And it is for the wise to understand. Well, there's 2 fulfillments of this, because vicarious filii Dei, a title for the Roman Catholic Pope, an important one too, because it's on the document that founded the papacy. In Roman letters converted, because the alphabet is Roman, and when we convert Roman letters to numerals, we get a number, because Roman letters are also numbers. Vicarious filii Dei equals 666. All right, but the secondary fulfillment of this for the second Antichrist, because it's a name that's to be calculated for those who are wise. In other words, those who aren't wise will not have been calculated this already, including, for example, those that are playing the Antichrist guessing game, because that isn't wise, and they haven't had the wisdom to recognize that, first of all, A, the Antichrist has been revealed, but B, who he is. Okay. So, the name Adonikam is equal to 68 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And the name Barack Obama is also equal to 608. The name Adonikam is equal to 408 in English gematria, and so is Barack Obama. Now, what's also relevant here is that Ezra, the book of Ezra is about rebuilding the wall of security. This is connecting to this predicted event on Wall Street. Now, what happened on this day, on February 13th, was the black swan skater fell. The black swan skater. The guy wearing an extremely effeminate, all black outfit that was basically transgender, and he fell. He was the overwhelming favorite. He had dominated, literally, seriously dominated figure skating for the last 3 or 4 years. He was a 4-time U.S. national champion, and was also named the Quad God, Quad being 4. That was his nickname. I think he nicknamed himself, though, which is really Antichrist to do such a thing, symbolically. Anyway, it was a shock. For people in the figure skating world, it was a shock. It was an unexpected, shocking event. It was a black swan event, literally. And it's what's interesting, too, is God has brought in the movie Black Swan into his Black Swan signs. And Black Swan is about the ballerina. And figure skating is like ballet. And so this literally was a black swan crash. Because not only did he fall, but he crashed. I mean, he totally choked in the last routine. He was way ahead. All he had to do was skate conservatively, and he would have won the gold. But he fell. He crashed, and it was a black swan stock market crash sign. All right. Now the thing too is that this crash of his, he fell twice. It was 60 plus 60 plus 60 months, as in 666, after lightning hit the Vatican twice. When the Pope resigned, giving 2 living popes. And Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And lightning from heaven is what is Barack Obama in Hebrew. Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning. Bama means high place, which is a metaphor in the Bible for heaven. As, for example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And the Jews would and as a euphemism, the high place for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains, Antichrist. But also, the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, the word from is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, like those who play the Antichrist guessing game, who already know this. Or, and what I mean is that you are confused, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. Sorry to be so arrogant about this, but I mean, it's just kind of frustrating, like it's so obvious. Like Jesus didn't say this to confuse us. Okay? And it's important. So stop playing the Antichrist guessing game. So anyway, we have this lightning from heaven connection here. And by the way, again, Barack Obama was born on the 6 times 6 times 6th day of the calendar year. And anyway, we get the 60 plus 60 months connection to the crash of the Black Swan figure skater, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 days to the predicted Black Swan crash event. All right. Let's see. Oh, and also on 3/3 is the day of the White Rabbit lunar eclipse, which is how I first started looking at this date in the first place, because of the February 17th being the solar eclipse, White Rabbit solar eclipse. It's followed by a White Rabbit lunar eclipse because the White Rabbit asteroid is still in conjunction with the lunar eclipse. And so we're following the White Rabbit. All right, I think that's enough for this video. I might add more, but if this is it, God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, A Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the odyssey.com or rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.